Great. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the second event in the eWords Bricks and Clicks Summer Series. I'm Marielle, I'm Director and Head of Digital at the eWord. And today we're exploring the shift that's happening right now in property. So, how AI has changed how a modern renter discovers a property, evaluates it, and then ultimately signs that lease. And joining me to break this down today are my colleagues Kai and Charlotte.
Hi, I'm Kai. I'm the Senior Social and Campaign Lead here at the eWord.
Hi, I'm Charlotte. I'm the Associate Senior Paid Media Manager at the eWord.
Great, and we're also incredibly excited to bring a more operational perspective to the table today. So, joining us is Fathi, Chief Operating Officer at the co-living brand AndSoul. So, welcome, Fathi. I don't know if you want to tell us a little bit about yourself as well.
Hi, I'm Fathi. Recently appointed COO of AndSoul, a co-living startup exclusively in London and London alone. Pleasure to meet you guys.
Oh. And then just a little bit of housekeeping before we start. If you do want to submit a question during the discussion, you just need to click on the chat, click submit a message to the host, and then we'll answer those at the end if we've got a little bit of time. So to start, I want to dive into the first kind of research part of the funnel. Historically, someone looking for an apartment would type a query into Google. Perhaps they would, click through three or four websites and then compare options themselves. But today we know that AI tools are compressing that journey into a much shorter phase. They're building the short lists, they're summarizing properties before a user even potentially lands on your website. So I guess my first question is, how do you think this shift is changing the actual research journey for renters?
I think there's one thing that brands need to prepare for, and it's a drop in organic traffic. So previously, whether it is apartment to rent, apartment to buy, PBSA brand, people are Googling and then going to each site individually and compiling what is the best fit for those. Now they're doing it all, whether it's on Gemini, Claude, ChatGPT. So that's essentially cutting that first bit of the journey out completely. However, it's not all bad. What it does mean is those people who do go through to your website are probably a little bit higher intent. So they're more likely to convert, they're more likely to come book a viewing, they're more likely to sign that lease. So there is the benefits of that. It just means an overall drop in traffic.
Yeah, I think from a paid media perspective, it does mean that the retargeting campaigns are also affected. Because as Kai said, if less people are going to the actual websites, then our standard pixel-based retargeting tools will have less to work with. So what that means for businesses is that it's really important to have first-party data, whether that's connecting a CRM to the ad accounts or manually uploading any lists. And I think this shift in behavior as well, obviously OpenAI has been pushing ChatGPT ads. I think AI platforms are going to be pushing their own ad platforms a lot. And honestly, I wouldn't be surprised if in the next couple of years it even potentially overtakes some of the channels that we're so used to, just with how many people are using AI and the rise of it in the last year.
Yeah, and kind of from an operator's perspective, you kind of always expected that the website might not be your first front door to your customers. They might have experienced you on social media or locally. I think the AI game changer for us and what scares me the most is that, you have a semi-sentient thing giving opinions about your brand that you might not be able to control. And so they're forming those thoughts, opinions, that initial research to try and narrow down those short lists. And as an operator, my kind of priority is how can I get the most positive and differentiated brand message for that AI chatbot or however way the AI experience is for that consumer to kind of recommend our brand. So it is both kind of scary and also an opportunity to kind of influence that effort.
Hmm.
I think just to echo what you're saying there, Fatty, as well, I think brands probably have to change a little bit where their investment goes. So there is a lot of principles with sort of AIO, GEO that match up with traditional SEO. However, the type of content that is being produced is a little bit different to get referenced on those sites. So anything that's sort of evidence-based content, so any research pieces, any bits that have expert commentary, attached or sort of question and answer. So it is just reshifting and then putting a little bit more investment into those pieces rather than your traditional blogs necessarily.
Yeah, completely agree. And also it's about, I think, what a new piece of research I saw was like it's the chatbots, all the top ones seem to be referencing, data points from the last 1,000 days. So any content that, you might have created beyond that might just be invisible. So that, constant cycle of content creation and refreshment is going to be really important, especially for the living sector, because, a lot of our websites might have been built, 3 years ago as an example, and a lot of the blog content might be old. So you're kind of having to reboot old content potentially as well.
Yeah, definitely. Just going back to what you mentioned, Fatty, there, around we know that LLM, so ChatGPT, Google Gemini, they prioritize that forum sentiment. So things like Google reviews, even Reddit, they're influencing when they build those shortlists. So from an operational side, in the past, managing resident feedback might be a more reactive customer service task, but how does it feel now, and have you changed your operational priorities now that you know that directly influences your organic acquisition pipeline?
Yeah, so we're very much at the coal phase. So there's a couple of things. So on the kind of consumer discovery side, right? So negative reviews now are like a serious issue for us in terms of reputation. Everybody gets negative reviews. It just so happens we try to provide a very positive experience as a sector, whether you're in PBSA, build to rent or co-living. But now every complaint is kind of like written. Every complaint response is kind of written for three audiences. The customer, the external new customers, and now the chatbots. The old days of, the head of marketing telling you, let's take it offline, let's talk to them. I think they might be dead. I think you need to provide a full and thorough response to all reviews with extreme kind of GDPR compliance in mind. So, without necessarily leaking accidentally or intentionally customer data, you kind of need to explain yourself. And hopefully that sentiment analysis from the chatbots takes that into consideration. And the other side is, I don't respond to complaints in writing anymore because everybody feels like they've written, something from a legal case. So every complaint that comes to my desk that's escalated, I actually book a time with that person face to face, and we try to resolve it because it's just AI versus AI then.
Yeah, you're right that it's really important for like the visibility of those reviews and the response to the reviews is really important. I see a lot of people use the comment section in ads or even organic posts to ask businesses a question. So they might ask about, the price, the availability of a property. And it's really important for businesses to be responding in depth in that comment section, because if other people are seeing that someone is getting a really nice response, then that adds to the social proof. But on the other hand, obviously, if that response or that question has been missed and there isn't an in-depth review, or it takes a long time to respond to that review, then that does give a negative perspective to other people. So there's so many different avenues in which people are asking questions and giving their feedback, and it's really important that nothing is missed.
Yeah, it goes back to, I think previously in the sector, organic social and community management was almost like a nice to have best practice, but now it's kind of center in the actual marketing matrix. So it needs to be a core part of what you're offering.
I think there's some great points, and I think it's obviously clear that AI is reshaping how people discover property brands organically. But as Charlotte started to touch on there, that's only half the picture. And when we look at paid campaigns, we're also seeing a massive push towards automation as well. So I wanted to start with you, Charlotte. Property marketers, we know they're notoriously protective of their paid media budgets. But why does the idea of sort of letting an algorithm manage those campaign decisions still trigger a lot of anxiety across the sector?
I think part of the hesitation is that we don't really get to see the behind the scenes of these AI algorithms. So, for example, when you turn on AI Max on Google or you switch on Advantage Plus features on Meta, we're essentially just turning on a toggle, and then we don't really get to see how Google and Meta is actually doing it. So we're trusting their algorithms to make those changes, and we're giving up control. And yeah, that I think is where the fear comes from. But it's really important to understand that the way people are searching has changed to a more long tail approach. a PBSA example would be, people aren't going to just be searching student accommodation Manchester anymore. Someone might actually search student flat near University of Manchester with bills included, with ensuite, essentially everything that they want to know about. And that's because the AI overview on Google can pull that information together. So people are now used to getting a response to every aspect of their query when they search online. So for advertisers, especially on Google, the standard exacto phrase match keyword lists, that wouldn't catch that volume of conversational variation. So it's turning on AI Max, for example, that is essential to show up for those queries. There still is an element of control, which is why people shouldn't fear it so much. Like I just mentioned AI Max, you can add text guidelines to make sure that the ad copy that is generated still has your guidance and aligns with your brand guidelines. So there is still a way that we can impact it. But I do understand why the fear is there. And I think we will start to find out more about how those algorithms work. And hopefully that will diminish that fear for advertisers.
Mm-hmm. And then just building on that, given that the special housing category, which for those that don't know, when you advertise on Meta, when you're advertising property, it heavily limits the targeting you can use. So you can't target by age, you can't target by more detailed interest, so like a specific university. So how do we get the algorithm to find the right people instead?
Essentially, your creative acts as that filter, as that targeting. So as an example, we're actually marketing a property development in York at the moment, and the buyers that are there are very opposite ends of the spectrum. So you've either got first-time buyers, which are like mid-20s to early 30s, and then you've got downsizers on the other side who are sort of late 50s, even early 70s to a point. Obviously, they're very different ends. It'd be great if we could target by age for those with specific messaging, but we can't. So what we've actually done is create two separate campaigns that have imagery and messaging that is very tailored to each. So even the downsizers, for example, the imagery is a much older audience, and likewise for the first-time buyers and younger. And we've essentially just used Meta Advantage Plus, which users basically will model people's behavior. So who is engaging with that, who is likely to convert, and then pushes it to similar people. And the results of that have actually been a lower cost per lead, a higher quality lead from sales feedback, and more volume in general. So it's working much better than your typical general messaging.
I think as well as the age targeting and interest, location targeting is also quite restricted in the special ad category. So I think one of the things we try and do is add as many hyper-local elements to the creative as possible. So it could be, actual postcode references, recognizable local landmarks, actual imagery of the development, anything that can tell the algorithm exactly where the residence is located so that it can target the right people. Any small geographic signals that you can add to the copy or the creative help with that.
Mm-hmm.
Personally. For me, I think I take a step back. Like I view all property marketing as local marketing, right? And just to go back, in my experience in at least the PBSA sector, there was a period, between 2015 and maybe 2018 where brands had like local property brands. You had Manchester whatever as its own Facebook page, potentially as its own Instagram page. And I'm thinking there's a big need to reboot those. So if you go right now, some of those kind of are dead and there's not been any new content for many, many years. Some brands are really doubling down on that local marketing and property marketing piece. I think that will be a really important avenue to kind of train the algorithm. Because at the end of the day, like students, renters, they're searching something to live, city, town, postcode within X miles of whatever, right? And the only way to do that is just by having a super local presence, both digitally and also on the ground as well. And from organizational design perspective, I'm thinking, how do I train our, general managers, assistant managers to be personalities, to be brand ambassadors? How can we train them to be social media savvy so they can get that content for us? How can we get the support of resident assistants to try and get more local student first content? Some retail brands are doing this really well. So Waitrose, Marks and Spencer, they're making the team the face of the brand. And I think there's an opportunity to double down on that. And on the marketing side, there'll be probably new marketing roles will have to be created to kind of train these teams to deliver this content, to organize this content. That operational marketing assistant role probably needs to be rebooted.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting point, and I think what all of you've just touched on there is we do feel like we're going full circle back to being more specific when the tools that we're using to advertise are pushing us to be broader. It's making, operators have to move in the opposite way. And on that sort of from the operator perspective, we're allowing algorithms to generate your targeting. It can still be risky from a brand identity piece. So I wondered, Fatty, at AndSoul, kind of how do you balance kind of needing to lean into that AI-driven algorithm for performance reasons, but still keeping your brand image consistent and right for the audience?
Yeah, look, we've really struggled with that, I'll be honest, because, our brand is evolving at the moment as we speak. The terminology we use is evolving. A big piece we found out, which is quite relevant, is, some of our brand is and then the ampersand sign and soul. And we found out like pretty quickly over the last couple of months that AI absolutely hates that. Right. It just absolutely hates it. So the way our brand is kind of presented to different, channels, different platforms is very inconsistent at the moment, and we own that. And so we're like, so how do we improve that? So we've really kind of doubled down on the AndSoul now, because that's a little bit easier to catalog, it's a little bit easier for the AIs to recognize. 96% of our customers are direct. We're not on Rightmove, we're not on Zoopla, we're not on the market, we're not on letting agencies, right? We're either organic, paid, social and search, or sorry, paid and social, paid and search, or organic. That's 96% of our customers, and the rest is like student platforms. So for us, we're risk takers. We like to experiment, and so for us, we have the advantage of being a disruptor, being a young brand that still can discover what it is to be kind of a mainstay brand within the London co-living market. So maybe other brands is not as kind of risk tolerant as we are, but we like to take risk, and we like to test and experiment and to optimize. And that's how we've been able to achieve 96% of our bookings being direct without relying on those aggregators and direct listings.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And I think touching on the risk as well, the risk side, but the shift to AI across industry and across the industry, we are seeing a theme around pressurizing maybe creative teams to be using AI for that content creation. And you do see that more across the advertising platforms. But I do think our audiences are getting a lot quicker and smarter at spotting AI generated copy and visuals, particularly that younger Gen Z audience. So, kind of a question around how do you think we can make sure brands don't get lost in that noise and still stand out when there's so much AI content out there?
I think when we're using AI, it's to remember it's a tool, not a strategist. So it is brilliant for speeding up parts of the process. So whether it is just to sort of challenge your own thinking and sense check things, whether it is to check grammar to speed up that process, or even just get past a blank page if you're staring at a campaign idea and just how to push it a little bit further. But it doesn't have that sort of sentiment feeling. So it's not able to communicate the real lifestyle benefits of sort of your brand you're building, and really give that human touch, which anything with property, it's considered purchase. It needs that human touch there. And I think where there is those property brands which are heavily relying on AI, the ones that don't will actually benefit further because you stand out more.
Yeah, I think as well, as you said, people are so used to seeing it now that they can spot it easily, but it's gone to the point where some people even think something is AI when it isn't. So it's so important for your copy to be unique. I think a question people should be asking themselves if they're writing copy or developing creatives, even with the help of AI, is could you paste your copy onto another competitor's ad and would it still work? And if it does, then it's probably not unique and specific enough. You really want it to be specific to what you're advertising and not just able to be used across all property brands.
Yeah. And I think I'd agree with both views. Like, AI does not fix a weak value prop, right? It kind of almost exposes it faster, I would say. And as Charlotte, you were saying, I've always had this gripe with the property sector because, I've been in it for such a long time, and it's a tough nut to crack, but like it feels like at times just all brands merge, right?
Yeah.
When there's real need for differentiation. And recently a post of mine went viral or essentially said, marketing amplifies the differences. It doesn't create them. So how do we create those differences, and how do we create it in a very human way? In our brand, we've got almost 20,000 Instagram followers on one account and then another 20,000 on another account because we run a wellness center as well. We've banned all AI content creation, right? For us, AI is back of house automation, efficiency, productivity, maybe some idea generation. But when it comes to execution, like the content we create is human creators, human artists, human videographers, and that's what we've doubled down on. And you can see that in premium brands, right? These days, you see some adverts where the advert is not the advert, it's behind the scenes of the advert just to show you, like, this is art, this is a different experience, this is luxury, this is premium offering, this is not AI slop. So that's quite important, I think, in terms of, for our brand at least, recognizing that, we'll try to be premium and we'll try to be human first, because you can't be a community-led co-living brand and then it's all AI in the background.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I think my only two pence there is I totally agree. I think there needs to have that human element within content creation. I think where AI can help on that process perhaps is that testing phase. And I think what we've been seeing with algorithms needing more ad variations to get the right people, using AI to just make the small changes and test different wording or different colors can help speed up that process operationally. But I totally agree with what you're saying, Fatty, around it's like that human creation side is what is now more considered premium when everyone's been using it for sure.
Yeah, if the barrier to entry is low, then by definition it's not a premium. And anybody can go on XYZ AI tool and create a video gen. And you see a lot on TikTok at the moment, like where people are selling like products by like phantom AI generated avatars.
Yeah.
Scary.
I'm not buying any of them.
No.
I think
Sorry, go on, Kai.
I was just going to say that's the thing as well. Like there is a customer negative perception sometimes about AI produced content. So that automatically, if you're using that just to the masses, then that naturally gets associated with your brand as well. And especially if it is these larger purchases like a home or whether it's rental for a year, that is a lot of money. So people just don't want to be associated with it.
Definitely. So kind of moving along down the funnel here. So once these campaigns, they've done their job, someone clicks through to your website, we're entering that more kind of delicate phase where we're converting that initial interest into more of a real relationship. And for me, chatbots, AI assistants, this is where they are standard now for those giving those quick answers and customer service. But again, I think there's a point where efficiency here can start to feel a bit impersonal or going back to a bit more risky. So Fatih, starting with you in sort of co-living, where I think, community and trust are really important. Where do you
Yeah.
draw the line there between the AI efficiency and the human element?
So we've not found a place for a chatbot in our company yet. We've been kind of exploring it, and we've dabbled in a few, tested a few. There's a certain market leader as well that's pretty good as well. But we're agnostic. We've tested, but we're not sure which direction it heads. Most of our customers are inquiring between like 7 a.m. and like 8 p.m. in a sense in this market. So there's no real need kind of to staff outside of those hours as such. You might get emails and whatnot. In the student sector, it's different because of time zone and other differences. You kind of need a 24/7 offering. And that's where I think these chatbots can be really effective in helping kind of take that customer through your sales and marketing funnel. But what I've seen as we were testing these tools and also trying to look at brands that are using them is there's a big difference. There's a big difference between the brands that are really executing really well with these chatbots, as in you're getting high quality answers, you're getting, really accurate detail, you're getting live updates and pricing and whatnot. And then there's some people who it feels like there's no ownership in that organization with the chatbot. It's not giving you answers quickly that are relevant. It's kind of giving generic answers. That's because no one's bothered to kind of own it and train it. So if you really need to invest a lot of time in getting this technology embedded within your systems and processes and kind of skilling it up. The best advice that I could offer personally is it's really simple, guys. Just get your general managers to take a voice recorder with them and just to talk through the building. Like, this room is XYZ, it's this big, it has this cupboard. Just use a voice transcript, right, tool to get that data and use it to train the AI. It takes one day. Right. Honestly, that's the best way I've found to train. And the models are so advanced these days, they kind of fill out the gaps. And we always say in our organization, AI is the only tool you can ask how to use it. So you can ask, what questions have I missed? Like, what elements should I miss? I need to go back to kind of clarify for our customers. And then you double down on that training. So that's kind of the top tips that I would provide.
Yeah, I think at the end of the day, people want to speak to humans a lot more than AI. It's kind of the opposite. We said at the start, people like to use AI for research, but when it comes to actually finding out information about a specific property or something like that, I know a lot of people go to the chatbots and quite quickly ask to speak to a human or an agent. And some chatbots are good at that, and some are really bad at that. And it can be really frustrating when you're trying to get an answer to a question. The AI bot isn't helping, but it's also not moving you to a human. And if someone just searched, for example, like flat to buy in Leeds, they come to your website and they start getting really frustrated with your chatbot, they're just going to leave your website, go look at all the other competitors and try on another website. And it's likely that if the first time they came to your website, they had a negative experience with a chatbot, you're not going to have a very positive view in their minds, and they're probably not going to reconsider you. So I definitely think chatbots need to be trained, like you said, Fatty, and also need to give people the option to speak to a human. I know some people say, leave us your email, we'll email you back as soon as possible, but just don't give the impression that we cannot move you to an agent or someone real that can speak to you.
And then, sorry, go on, Kai.
Sorry, I was just going to say, I think in the same breath with that is if they've got a negative perception, it's then how are you going to falter in the other parts of the business if you can't even get the initial interaction right? So then it's what's going to happen with maintenance? How is it in exchanging contracts? Everything else then falls into that negative perception. So people just run for the hills.
I think that's a great point. And, you don't want residents to start their lease with that negative sentiment, even if they do go ahead and kind of lose that trust there, which I think kind of leads us nicely on to kind of my next point and last part of that funnel is, getting someone through the door and signing a lease. That is a major win, what we're all aiming for. But in sectors like PBSA and BTR and co-living, that real value is still the long-term retention. So just to kind of finish, I wanted to end by looking at how AI extends past that initial marketing funnel and into the actual resident experience. So Fatih, I wondered if you could touch on kind of how operators could use AI to improve resident satisfaction and reduce that churn once they've moved in.
So in our business, I think that the struggle that we have, maybe, we're kind of traditionally structured where we have marketing, sales, and operations, right? So the operations team don't do sales, sales don't do operations, right? For us, the customer onboarding, that first check-in, that first experience at the property is like the most important experience, right? And where we've struggled in the past, was that handover between sales and operations. Did that customer book parking? What was their preferences in terms of apartment type? Sometimes customers come because we're a short stay platform and there's no room number on the contract, and as an example. So we've really invested in getting like as much knowledge about the customer as possible. So what operators I think need to do is, and what we've done over the last few months, is really fix that data layer. So with AI, like if it can't query your data, wherever it might be, shared drive, emails, this, that, PMS, CRM system, if the ecosystem is not connected And if the AI can't perform a kind of holistic search about that customer, then, that onboarding process falls apart. So we've worked really hard to try and make that handover process as smooth as possible. And then when they come to onboard, kind of those automations about what to expect during the check-in itself, what attracts customers, it's very much, as everybody in real estate knows, different to what makes customers stay at your property. So retention and attraction are totally different. They might come for the location, the lifestyle, the amenities, but they stay because things just run well, right? Things just work. They just run well. They're happy. They get great service. So we've not cracked this element yet, but like the next area we're focusing on is like ticketing systems and maintenance systems, because that's the number one pain point that causes people to leave. So, and then we also provide housekeeping services every fortnight as well, because we're a quite high service offering. And so how can maintenance, housekeeping, and the customer kind of interact to make sure we're serving them as fast as possible, keeping them up to date? I think those are kind of the biggest wins for us, but we fixed, kind of the upstream sales handover challenge, but now it's kind of like we're looking deeply into that maintenance and kind of stay area as well.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting, and it kind of goes back full circle. If you're using AI to solve that operational piece, maintenance, making their experience great, that's only going to influence positive reviews, which is then going to improve your organic visibility right at that top of the funnel when you're attracting new residents. So it's really important that AI piece goes kind of full round in the funnel. Um, so great. I think that brings us to the end of our discussion today. I think we've hit time. So I wanted to say a massive thank you to Fatih for bringing your experience at AndSoul to the conversation, and Kai and Charlotte as well for breaking down that more digital side. Thank you everyone for listening. If you do want to learn more about some of the topics we've discussed today, you can download a copy of our report, which is the Property Marketing 2026 Rebuilt for AI, if you head to our website. But thank you very much for tuning in, and we'll see you at the next Bricks and Clicks Summer Series event. Thanks, everyone.